If you're watching this, there's a good chance you've had at least one app idea that actually excited you. Not just a random thought, but a real web application you could see working like a tool or a platform, something that solves a problem you've personally felt. And today, building that application isn't the hard part anymore. You can spin up a working web app in minutes with just a few prompts using AI tools. It's never been easier. But do you know what still stops people? Getting it off localhost. It doesn't matter if it feels not ready. It will never feel ready. The real shift happens the moment you see it running on your own server and your own domain. That's when it stops being a side project and starts being a real product. And with Dockploy, I'll show you exactly how to make that jump using just a few commands. You keep building your app locally, make any changes you want, and when you're ready, you run a single command, and it's automatically redeployed to your server through Dockploy. Now, before we can deploy anything, we need the most important piece, a server. And for that, we're going to use Hostinger, which is also the sponsor of today's video. I've worked with their products for a while now, and what I like about them is that they're straightforward. You get full control, solid performance, and you're not locked into some complicated ecosystem. So to follow along, click the link in the description and choose a VPS plan. For this video, I'm going with the KVM2. It's powerful enough to host one or multiple early-stage apps without any issues. But if your budget allows it and you want more headroom for traffic or heavier workloads, you can absolutely choose a higher plan. For the billing period, the 24-month option gives you the best overall value and better renewal rates, plus a free domain, but the 12-month plan, it's fine as well. When selecting the server location, just choose the one closest to you or your target audience for better performance and lower latency. Then, under the operating system section, switch to the OS with panel tab and select Dockploy. That way everything comes pre-configured directly. Now, the final price may vary slightly depending on your location and any local taxes that apply. But you can get an extra 10% off by using the coupon code SOFTSWEB at checkout. After that, click Continue, create an account, and complete the payment. Once you're inside the Hostinger control panel, you should see a notification to claim the free domain if you chose the 12 or 24-month plan. In my case, I'm getting a .cloud domain, but depending on the offer and availability, you might see a different domain extension. I'm going to choose softsweb.cloud to match the name of my YouTube channel. Make sure to fill in all the required information correctly, then click on Skip because we're going to handle the domain configuration directly from the dashboard. First, on the left side menu, click on VPS and copy the IP address of the server you just created. Then go to Domains, open Domain Portfolio, and click on Manage next to your domain. On the left side, click on DNS name servers and delete the existing A records. Now add a new A record that points your main domain to the IP address of your VPS. And another one exactly the same, but use a wildcard for the name. This is going to be very helpful when we'll create subdomains. And that's it for the setup. Now let's talk about the app. If you already have a web app you want to deploy, you can skip this step. But if not, let's generate something quickly using AI. There are a bunch of tools that can do this in minutes, like Base44, Replit, Cursor, and so on. For simplicity, I'll use Lovable. I've written a simple prompt to generate a basic web page for this example. You can ask it to generate a landing page for your app instead. Just give it a clear prompt and wait a few moments for it to finish generating everything. Once it's done, click on the GitHub icon in the top right corner, then connect your GitHub account. Here, click on Connect Project, choose a GitHub organization or create one if you don't have one yet, and confirm the transfer. Now open GitHub and clone the repository on your local machine. Now let's go back to our Dockploy configuration. By this point, the DNS propagation should be completed, or at least mostly propagated. You can quickly check this using a tool like What's My DNS.net. Most of the locations are resolved, so we are good to go. Now go to your domain on port 3000. Then fill up your information, set a password, and hit register. Now go to Web Server under the Settings menu and set a server domain and enable HTTPS. This will be the subdomain where you access the Dockploy interface. It can be any subdomain you prefer. In my case, I'll use dockploy.softsweb.cloud. Wait a few moments for the certificate to be issued and become valid, then visit your subdomain. And as you can see, the page is loading correctly and the connection is now secured. Log in again, go to Settings, then click on Git. Here, connect your GitHub account. I'll choose to give it access only to the app repository I'm going to deploy. You can always change this later if you want to deploy more projects. Now, go to Projects, click on Create Project, and set a name and a description. Now we can create a service. We have different services like Application, Database, Compose, Template, and AI Assistant. We'll go with the first one as Application, where we set again a name and a description. Then click on it, select your GitHub account, the repository where you have the application. For the branch, we only have the main branch, but that is fine, and then hit Save. Scroll down, and for the build type this time, we are going to choose Nixpacks because it will handle the build for us, and hit Save. Now back on top, click on Domains and select where do you want your app to be deployed. I want to be deployed directly on the main domain, and also make sure to check this option to generate an SSL certificate with Let's Encrypt. Go to the General tab, click on Deploy, and wait a few moments for the automatic build to complete. Once it's done, go to your domain and you'll see the app live and the SSL certificate has been issued and is working properly. Now let's quickly recap the workflow so everything is clear. You have a project locally which you pushed to GitHub, or maybe it was already there if you generated it with Lovable. Either way, the code in your GitHub repository. Then you gave Dockploy access to that repository and created the initial deployment from the interface. So what happens next? Let's say you don't like this pink Dockploy text. You open the project locally, change the color in the code, and run it on localhost to make sure it looks better. Once you're happy with it, you simply add the commit and run git push to the main branch. If you go to Dockploy to the deployment tab, you can see building, and after it's done, just go again to your domain and the update is live. That's it. It really doesn't get much simpler than this. But real apps need databases, so let's add one here too. Right now this section is just static text, one-click deploy, push to Git, and watch your app go live. Instead, let's make it real. We're going to show a live counter like already made X deployments. Go to Projects and create a new project called Database. Click Create Service, choose Database, then select Postgres. Give it a name, click Create, then hit Deploy and wait for it to finish. Once it's deployed, open it and copy all the connection values you see here. Now go back to the front-end app and add the following environment variables. After that, go to the General tab and redeploy the app. I already updated the code to handle the new deployment webhook and the endpoint that reads the deployment count from Postgres. Since this is just a quick demo, I won't go deep into how it's implemented, but the full repository is linked in the description if you want to see exactly what's happening. Alright, now let's test the get deployments endpoint, and yep, it's working. Now let's simulate another deployment using the post endpoint. And check it directly on the website, and you can see the number increased, which means we're pulling the value from the database correctly. Now that everything is live, but real products don't stop here. If you actually care about running something in production, there are 3 things you need to think about: backups, security, and control. Let's start with backups, because here's the reality. If you accidentally delete the database, or if you break something during an update, what happens? If the answer is, I lose everything, then you're not running production, you're gambling. Dockploy does support database backups to external S3 storage, which is great if you want to build a fully customized backup pipeline and control every detail yourself, but if your goal is something fast, simple, and reliable without adding more moving parts, the easiest solution is to use the VPS-level backups directly from Hostinger. By default, you already get weekly snapshots of your entire VPS, and that's important because these are full system backups, not just your database or your application files, but the entire server state exactly as it exists at that moment, which means if something goes wrong, you can restore everything precisely as it was. And if you want even more peace of mind, you can upgrade to automated daily backups, so the whole VPS is backed up every single day automatically without scripts, manual configuration, or external storage providers, just a simple infrastructure level solution that works in the background. For most developers and founders, especially in the early stages, This is more than enough because it's straightforward, reliable, and removes one more thing from your mental load when you're trying to focus on building and shipping your product rather than worrying about whether your backups are actually running. Now let's talk about something that most people ignore until it's too late. And that's security, because just getting an app online is one thing, but leaving everything exposed to the public internet is not what production ready actually looks like. The first thing you should think about is the firewall, and inside the Hostinger panel, you can configure firewall rules to control exactly which ports are accessible from the outside world. And for a setup like this, you really only need a few ports open, specifically port 22 for SSH, so you can securely access your server, port 80 for HTTP, and port 443 for HTTPS. You do not need to expose your database port publicly, and you definitely do not need to expose internal application ports that your services use to communicate with each other, because Dockploy handles internal routing through a reverse proxy, which means your containers talk to each other privately inside the server without those ports ever being visible to the outside world. For example, if you now try to access the initial Dockploy on port 3000, it won't work anymore. This layered separation is what actually keeps things secure, because from the perspective of the public internet, only ports 80 and 443 are accessible, while everything else remains internal and protected, and that is exactly how a clean and production-ready setup should be structured. Now, let's talk about scaling, because this is the part that usually scares people when they think about running something on their own VPS. Let's say your app starts growing and you begin getting real traffic, real users, and real usage patterns that actually stress the system a little bit. The important thing to understand is that you don't need to rewrite everything or migrate to some completely different architecture just because your app is becoming successful. In most cases, the first step is simply upgrading your VPS plan, so you get more CPU and more RAM, which immediately gives your application more breathing room without changing your code or your deployment workflow. And if you eventually need more separation between components, you can start splitting services in a clean and structured way, maybe moving the database to a larger instance, or introducing something like Redis for caching, or adding a background worker for asynchronous jobs, while keeping the same overall structure you built from the beginning. The key idea here is that the foundation doesn't change, because when you start with a clean deployment stack and proper service separation, scaling becomes an evolution rather than a rebuild. And that's really the beauty of starting correctly from day one. When you deploy like this, you actually own the stack, which means you're not locked into a past pricing model or guessing what's happening behind the scenes whenever something breaks. So let's quickly recap. We provisioned a VPS, selected Dockploy directly from the panel, connected GitHub, deployed a Vite app, configured SSL, added Postgres, set environment variables, enabled auto redeploy on GT push, added dynamic data, configured backups, and hardened the firewall, all on a single VPS. That's a practical, production-ready deployment stack. If you want to follow this setup, use the Hostinger link in the description and the coupon code SOFTSWEB for an extra discount. Start with one VPS, ship your idea, and build from there. Because the hardest part isn't coding anymore, it's deciding to take action. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.